What if I told you the church is overdue for reform, and it's overdue by about 40 years? What if the corruption that we're seeing now, the spiritual abuse, the financial scandals, and the unchecked power that we're seeing in certain parts of the church, what if some of it could have been avoided if someone had simply pulled the brake? And that's exactly what we're talking about today. In today's video, this is a powerful segment from an interview that I did last year with the creators of The Religion Business. If you're not familiar with The Religion Business, it's a 7-part docuseries about how the church became what it is today, what we've lost along the way, and some practical solutions to returning to being a church that's above reproach and a beacon of hope. The church that Jesus established. And the full documentary officially releases to the public on July 10th, and we want you to be one of the first to see it and to join this reform conversation with us. And if you use the link in the description and the pinned comment below, it's a link that's just for the Church Disrupted community. You can actually get 10% off of the series and be one of the first to see it when it releases on July 10th. But for now, let's dive into this conversation about reform today.
Reformation in the church space is 40-ish years past due. And so here's
Agreed.
why. In the 1970s, a guy named Jim and Tammy Baker, I think it was PTL Ministries, got busted first. They wanted to build 2 hotels and they raised hundreds of millions of dollars. They sold lifetime memberships to these hotels. And it was basically like the Disneyland of Christianity. They ended up pocketing most of the money. They were driving around Bentleys. Their dogs had air-conditioned dog houses. He went to jail. Ironically, he's back on TV now, spreading the gospel. Praise God. But so Congress back then saw this problem with modernity colliding with religion. Yeah. And they saw it. They go, okay, like let's go back to 1913. If Jeff, you were a pastor in Ohio and you had 75 people in your pews and you were an abusive pastor, how many people could you abuse and take advantage of? 75.
That's right.
And so you had those 75. You're talking to 10,000. And then moved to TV in the 60s. Now you're talking to millions, right? So now your audience is larger. Your abuse or your malicious intent or even your good intentions can now hit a broader audience, right? And so Congress in the 70s was going, ooh, like this is going to get out of hand. And so I think his name was Senator Hatfield drafted a bill that said, hey, okay, if you're a church or a nonprofit and you're asking someone for donations, on that moment that you asked for the donation, you have to provide your financials. They don't have to look at them if they don't want, but you have to give them your financials so they can see your financial overview. Well, there was another senator who went to Billy Graham and he goes, hey, Billy, we're in trouble here. This bill might pass. And I can't remember his name. I might be mixing it up. Maybe it was Hatfield that went to Billy Graham. I can't remember. But he goes to Billy Graham and he goes, hey, Congress might pass this bill. And so Billy Graham and about 30 other evangelicals got together, evangelical leaders, and they spun up what is called the ECFA, or the Evangelical Council for Financial Ability. And that was a response to Congress saying, hey, we have a problem that needs to keep them And so Congress saw the problem 43 years ago, and they tried to address it. But Billy Graham, with good intentions, because I think Billy had good intentions in what he was doing, spun up this organization. What's the organization? It's the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability. What is it? It's a seal that a lot of churches in the U.S. have on their website.
Yeah, we looked at them in the miracle offering stuff because they don't offer much. They offer about 4 lines. It's your total assets, your total liabilities.
Yeah. Well, but so what the ECFA is it's the definition of a conflict of interest. Because if Jeff and Chris both run churches that I'll be the ECFA, that use my seal, I charge Jeff and Chris $500 and something bucks a year to use that seal. So if I'm the regulatory body, the quote unquote regulatory body, but then you guys are paying me to keep my lights on and doors open, what good is it for me to actually crack down on you? And so the ECFA has been the standard for quote unquote accountability for the last 40-ish years. They have no teeth. They have no way to audit. They have no real spine. And so Christians for 40 years have kind of been like, oh, we regulate, this body regulates us. So flash forward 43 years, here we are today. And now not only can, like, let's say a select few pastors, so the Billy Grahams of the world and the Jim Bakkers of the world, not only can like a small group abuse at scale, now almost every pastor can. They can bring in tithes and donations and then just fund marketing spends on social media saying, hey, here's my video. Here's my more aggressive political spot. So the Congress in the 70s saw the issue. Now we're 43 years past that. And what's happened since then? The internet, social media, like technology's just exploded. And so what we've realized in the show is the abuse in the nonprofit sector, and then especially in the religious nonprofit sector, is on an exponential growth curve. And so here's a really sad, I haven't even told Chris this. I just got the email 2 days ago, or maybe I told you, Chris, 53 billion was stolen in 2023. Guess what they're estimating to be stolen in 2024?
70.
86 billion.
Oh my gosh.
So the growth is literally going, it's just, it has these afterburners now. And this system, and so Philip Hackney says this in the show, he goes, the nonprofit sector is primed to buckle because there's so much capital pushing on it and there's so little oversight that the abuse is just skyrocketing. And he goes, no one can get a hold of it anymore.
Yeah.
It's such a Goliath that it's going to buckle. And he's like, I don't know what's going to happen.
Which is,
it's not going to be pretty.
And it's why, because as someone who's wanting to make a difference in these spaces, starting a nonprofit to really tackle these issues, right? If we don't do something different, then we end up being a part of the same problems. That's what, myself and our board early on are wrestling with. What can we do different? How, we're really asking, how transparent can we be? Like, we're trying to push the boundaries on that, because if we don't, anybody can become a part of the same system.
Chris, we play in these boxes and we play in systems coming from the public, publicly traded and for-profit world. What are your thoughts on those secular companies, that are quote unquote capitalist companies and greedy, are more transparent than anything in the nonprofit space? What are your thoughts on bringing some of those practices, those accountability practices into the nonprofit space?
So this goes back to, we live in the United States of America, capitalistic economy. It's such, the power goes into the people's hands, right? So, if you're buying a product, you should know what you're buying, right? You are making a decision how you spend your money. If you are going to invest in a business and you're going to buy shares of that business, whether it's private or public, it is your decision. And as your decision is made in something like that, you are going to be relying on transparent data that is provided to you to make that educated decision. And it's the same thing. If in the nonprofit space, you are cool with donating your money, investing your money, because it's an investment, it is. You may not view it that way, but you should. Because if you viewed it that way, more than 3% would follow up and we'd have better accountability. So this goes back to putting the power in the people's hands. If you're cool with your pastor having a private jet, like that is a decision that you make. This is like, you have freedom of choice, but you need to know that is what you are paying for. You need to know where that money is going. And this goes back to just being a better steward of financial resources, right? I mean, we live in a country where I forget what the number is now. Is it 34 or 37 trillion in debt? We don't know where the money's going. We're just, and that's why everyone's answered all this is tax to churches, tax to churches. That's what people scream at us all the time. And it's
one of the things we hear most.
The power needs to go back to the people's hands in transparency. Let's get less hands in the cookie jar for just more financial misrepresentation to happen. That's what we don't need.
Well, if we would if we want reform, all we have to do, and again, it has happened on a broad scale, but all we have to do is say, as donors and Christians, if you don't provide detailed financial reports and answer certain questions, we won't give and we won't come. Yep. If you stop attending and you stop giving, even some of these churches that are massive will buckle and cripple overnight. They will do what they need you to do because they are hungry for that money. then they need you to be attending or that money's not coming in. So we have a lot more power than we think we do. That's one of the things I always tell people. If you're worried that your church is dabbling in some of these systems, or you're worried that your church is becoming a little spiritually abusive, even if they don't mean that, make your vote with your money and your attendance, right? Withhold that if you need to until you're going to get those answers, because that's how we hold people accountability. And without the people, this isn't going to be solved by government. Without the people actually saying we're going to hold these institutions accountable, reform won't happen and accountability won't come.
Yeah, one thing that has been eye-opening for me when we talk to pastors is we ask them, we get a lot of pushback that people are saying tax the churches. And the pastors' responses, the majority of them say, fine, tax us. They go on the defense, which I think is so backwards, because it's like, if you're a steward of resources, saying that should be the last option. You should say, I am better at managing and creating impact in my community than the government will be. But instead of them taking the proactive approach, most of them take the reactive and say, fine, you want to tax us, we don't care. And what does that mean? It means that, number one, they think they have a consistent revenue stream, and their revenue stream has never been questioned. And so they don't care. They're like, we'll just figure it out. We'll go raise more money. We'll ask for more money. We'll ask for pledges and all this junk that a lot of these big churches are doing now. And then what it also shows is that they've lost their identity. And this goes to Bruce Wideck, who's a development economist at USF. He's in the show. And he goes, Nathan, the act of giving today in the Western world, and donors are not going to like this, is a consumption-driven action. And so he goes, it's called the warm glow effect. When you give, your dopamine spikes, you feel good, you feel like you've done something.
Yeah.
That is consumerism. That is the same thing as having a drink of alcohol. If you like alcohol, it's the same thing as getting that soda kick. You are giving yourself a rush. So when we see giving as that, or when that's how we see giving, is that warm glow, makes me feel good. What does that mean? I don't care where the money goes. I've gotten what I needed out of it. And so he goes, Nathan, his whole purpose, he wrote a great book called Shrewd Samaritan. And he goes, the whole purpose of giving is to identify with that end user who your money is going to benefit. Yeah. And so when you don't identify with the cause, when you really don't identify with that orphan in Argentina, or you don't identify with that vet who's homeless on the street, or you don't identify with those single mothers, at the end of the day, you don't care. And he goes, we've lost our focus from a church perspective on giving, because we have to identify. And then when we identify, what do we demand as a giver? We demand that the leadership milk every cent out of that dollar they can to create impact. And then the pastor would do the same thing. And so when a pastor says, tax us, it shows me instantly that they don't know, that they've lost their identity, and they think they have this endless revenue supply. Yeah. Because why? Because of quote unquote tithing or giving. And so the show breaks that paradigm pretty heavily.
That's the two most common responses I see when we talk about tithing, or we talk about church systems, church growth systems, right? When we talk about those, the two most common responses I get from pastors, and again, this isn't everybody. We got some incredible pastors who have great conversations with us. I love it. They're really setting an example. But far and away, the most common response is defensive and deflection. Deflection. And if I gave it a third one, it would be villainizing. Let's just start calling you names or putting you in a group that now looks like the villain. And I think that it's one of those things that I hate it, but I'm trying to get better at not responding to it, not getting baited into it, but simply saying, hey, your fruit's showing. People are watching, your fruit's showing. So I'm hoping that people are seeing this, watching this, and saying, oh, well, there is something here. Because again, just like when you ask those questions, we talked about that earlier, Chris, you can tell a lot from someone's response.